Papi, you can't have this. So this little angel right here is the reason that I spent the last 48 hours all weekend long building this fence. Papi stays in her crate right now while I'm at work. It just wasn't enough room for her to get her energy out during the day. Building a fence like this doesn't have to cost a lot or be complicated. It makes her happier. It makes me, more sane. And in today's video, I'm gonna show you exactly how I built it. I went through a lot of different ideas before building this fence, from ways that cost a lot of money and were gonna look really, really nice and permanent, all the way down to staking and running a wire fencing, which is basically what I did, but I elevated that a little bit. Materials that I used included 2x4s, 2" by 3" welded wire mesh, T-post garden stakes, and then I also used these custom steel brackets that I plasma cut at work, and a bunch of screws. I'll talk a little bit about the build process next and my thoughts along the way. So my first step was to take measurements of the entire area, figure out how much material and lumber and mesh I was gonna need, and also kind of just plan out, generally speaking, like how the fence was going to work. I did end up going to Lowe's 3 times throughout this process, but it wouldn't be a real project if you didn't go to Lowe's at least 3 times. Yeah, the first component I fabricated for the fence were these hanging brackets that are hanging on the block wall. I've had these in my head forever. The challenge was like, how do you hang a post on a block wall without actually damaging or screwing into the block wall, but in a way that's really sturdy, but that's not gonna like imbalance the weight of the blocks and the fence. This is me here with the CNC plasma cutter, one of my favorite digital fabrication tools that I have access to. You can just build anything on the CNC plasma. I love metal. I could talk about metal and metal fabrication all day long. My background is in sculpture, so it's understandable that I would love metal. You can't have my coffee. No. I took measurements and cut all those out. It was a super fun little afternoon job, and that was really what kicked off my momentum for the entire fence build. The following morning, I was back here and I basically just brought my saw over here, took measurements kind of on site and cut down all my 2x4s, so those were like ready to go. I have had this chop saw for literally almost a decade. I got it when I was a student from Harbor Freight, Chicago Electric. But who knew that this chop saw would still be kicking like 10 years later? I had never experimented with this technique before, but I decided to paint all of the frames prior to assembling them. And I thought for this build especially, like that's just gonna make my life so much easier, because once they're in these big, bulky, unwieldy frames, like it's just gonna be tough to paint them in an efficient way. And so I thought, let's just knock all this out with my brand new paint sprayer, and that is the right tool for the job, my friends. Alrighty, so I finally finished painting all of the 2x4s, and I am covered in paint. I even ruined my shoes, but it's gonna be worth it, so check it out. My next steps are to start assembling the frames, and then I'll be able to install it and then install the fence for good. I'll pop back in for a check-in a little bit later in the process. Okay. So after everything was painted, I went ahead and assembled all the frames. When I built the gates, I used a Craig jig to get nice pocket holes and kind of get this flat frame, but overall it was super simple. I just drilled pilot holes, screwed them all together, and built them 1, 2, 3, 4. I did have fun. I've built a lot of frames in my life. There's something really satisfying about just screwing big rectangles of wood together. I joke with some of my students, like once you start building stuff, you never stop building boxes. You just build box after box after box, and every project is just kind of a different variation on a box. So before I could like string up any wire mesh, I had to install the T-posts in the ground. So I bought this thing called a post driver, and it really is just the right tool for the job. I tried to keep them as upright and level as possible, but it was a little bit tricky just because well, it was just tricky. You know, I've never done it before. And then it was time to kind of assemble everything and start putting it all in. So I put all the frames into the porch. I just screwed them into the awning that already exists. And I took my time to just make sure they were level and make sure they were plumb and square to one another. Installing them without a second set of hands was definitely a challenge, but it was fun. You know, I've done some renovation work and some framing in this house back there. You know, once you know how to do it, you can just kind of construct any space you want because you know how to build these frame walls. Nice. Right, good morning everyone. So I am back at it today, and needless to say, this was not a single day build, but it will be a single weekend build. So I'm gonna show you what we've got going on over here. It's super early and I'm hoping to just hit a lot of this remaining install while it's cool out here, and then I can enjoy the fenced yard for the rest of the day. So check it out. I had to save the wire mesh installation for the next day, and good thing I did because that was probably the most tricky part of this whole build. It's cheap for a reason. It's hard to work with, it's hard to cut. By the end of it, like my hands were just sore. They're still sore today. The wire mesh is a lot. It's like the big rolls are very unwieldy to manage by yourself. Like once you release the tension of the roll, it just kind of has a mind of its own. It can't be done alone, just with a lot of patience and a lot of grip strength. On this inside part, I just used screws that had like a wide flange head, and I screwed those in so that the head of the screw was clamping the wire down. I did that as well on the block wall. With the T-posts, I just kind of wired each connection point by hand, which was time consuming, but luckily there was only 4 posts. Finally, I put the hanger posts on the block wall. They were designed so they could just kind of hook over and with gravity just hold a 2x4. My design, like in my head, I would say 90% of the way translated to real life. There was some lateral movement in the posts, like they kind of shifted right to left. So I did end up putting a plastic shim in the back and just hammering that shim down until each post was like locked in and solid. The other step I had to do for the block wall was, it is a very old block wall and some of those capstones are actually like a little bit loose. So I got some PL 500 landscaping adhesive and just like squirted it on there and reattached several of the cinder blocks. I also had to install the gate hardware, which was just like too cheap, like a cheap kit I got from Lowe's that was called like Rustic Gate. But it just seemed like the most effective way to like get the job done without overcomplicating it. Black hardware on this bright orange ended up looking really nice. What's up? So it is about 3 p.m. on Sunday and I finally finished the Papi fence build. I'm about to give you like a sneak preview. Here we go. So everything has the wire mesh. Everything's painted orange and attached, and I have the 2 gates. So I couldn't be happier with how this all turned out. And yeah, Papi is now contained in this small part of the yard. So if I want her to go in the big yard, I can, but I mean, this is like, yeah, her little area. Yeah, I can't tell you the peace of mind that this fence has given me. I mean, even this morning, I was making coffee, I was doing laundry, I was doing a bunch of chores. Normally things that I can't watch Papi and do that at the same time. And she usually runs around the house and like finds something to get into. Just this morning, I was able to be like, Papi, go run around outside. And I let her run around out here, but I knew exactly where she was. She couldn't tear around the yard, she couldn't tear around the house. I could do my chores. Just in one day, the peace of mind that this has brought me and hopefully the joy that it brings her, I just couldn't be happier. Pop down in the comments, let me know what you think. Let me know if you've ever used a similar fencing strategy or if you have ideas of your own. Yeah, thanks for joining me today. Subscribe if you like what you're seeing, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. You lost it again. There it goes. There it goes. I guess this is one downfall to the fences. her ball can roll out that little gap. So she's lost it like twice already.